What we're seeing is a political earthquake. And unfortunately, the profiteer of this earthquake is not another democratic party, but is a right-wing party, which many believe to be anti-democratic and not based on the constitution.
Welcome to the ELIAMEP podcast series. I have the pleasure to host in this podcast Dr. Ronald Meinardus, Senior Research Fellow and Coordinator of Research Projects on Greek-German Relations in ELIAMEP. We're going to talk about what is happening in Germany, what is changing in Germany. Ronald, thank you very much for this discussion. A lot of things are happening in Germany, and I want us you to help us clarify them, see what is happening really there.
Thank you, Odin, first of all, for giving me the opportunity. If you say a lot of things are happening, I couldn't agree more. I spent the better part of the summer in Germany, which is my home country in a way, but many know that I'm actually residing in Athens. So I have a perspective of Germany, which is maybe a little different from the mainstream because I look at Germany from the outside. But this gives me also, if I may, the luxury to see things maybe in a different way. And what is happening in Germany, it really depends on which angle you take. Germany is, and this is an explanation for the commotion you see if you follow German politics, is basically in a permanent electoral campaign. And this is due to the fact that Germany, unlike, for instance, Greece, which is a centralized state, Germany is a federal republic. And as a federal republic, it consists of 16 independent, if you so like, relatively autonomous federal states, the so-called Bundesländer. And in these Bundesländer, we have at different times local elections, peripheral elections, which are politically very, very important. And in a short time from now, on the 8th of October, there will be these elections in the state of Hessen, which is the state which is around Frankfurt, and in Bavaria, Munich. These are very big and influential, important states. And what is happening there is, of course, also an important political barometer for what is happening in the capital. So a lot of the political turmoil, if you may, a lot of the political discussion and tension you see if you follow German politics is due to the fact that in these states, there will soon be democratic elections. And of course, the politicians and the political parties are nervous. They want to win. And therefore, they are in campaign mode. And many of the local issues, which are usually discussed in these local parliaments and on the local level, they are given a national dimension. And what happens in Berlin reflects on what is happening also in these Länder. And therefore, there is what I would say permanently this tension, which makes governing for the central government. And here we must say, in Germany, we have a government which consists of 3 different political parties, a challenge at times and difficult.
Now, you bring me to my next question, which has to do also with elections, but in a way, and the path that Germany is taking. And first of all, is that economy. Economy in Germany shows no sign of recovery from a winter recession and cemented its position as one of the world's weakest major economies. Why, Ronald? And what went so very wrong with Germany and its economy? That's my first question. And how is that affecting the elections?
Yes, I mean, these are very, very important questions, and these are both developments. Politics and economy are very closely related. And you're correct in your statement is that Germany is indeed one of the big international economies, which is doing very bad, actually is doing worse than others. And this is not only a German problem, because Germany being the biggest economy in Europe, and what happens in Germany, of course, has also an indirect, for some also a direct effect on what happens outside of Germany. And in former times, Germany was called the powerhouse and Germany was called the engine. So for Europe to move ahead, it was Germany, the German economy, the German industry which was pulling. But now this pull is not happening. and there are some analysts and some business, I wouldn't say business leaders, but some journalists, certainly, who are already discussing Germany in the context of the new sick man of Europe. There was an article, I think it is in the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago, which was very, very intensively debated also in Germany. I would say this analysis is overrated. It is correct that in this year, according to OECD and also to International World Bank data, Germany's economy will not grow. It will shrink by 0.2%. But looking ahead into 2024, Germany will again be on a growth track, not on a very, very aggressive growth track, but there will be growth of, I think, 1.4% or the like of this. And this is not very dramatic, but it at least shows that the problems the economy has now are not the problem of a deep recession. This is not the case. Now, why is this? Germany, more than other countries, is affected by what is happening in China. Germany, more than other economies, a globalized economy, and with globalization in crisis, this immediately is affecting also the German economy. Germany exports most or very much of its product, and if the export markets are not as dynamic as they used to be, of course, German industry immediately senses. This is the one structural problem, and this is not a problem which is today or tomorrow. China's issues are global issues. They're also politicized issues, and looking ahead, the issue of German-Chinese economic relations will be an issue for the years to come and will affect also the economic situation of Germany. Number two, Germany has lost its cheap natural gas it received from Russia. And Germany for decades received this cheap gas from Russia, and it was one of the machines that pushed growth, and this has fallen away. And this is the high energy costs are one of the main problems in German industry at this time of day. And there's a lot of political discussion how the government can help industries to somehow overcome this issue. And this is, again, a structural issue. It's politically motivated, and it's a problem which is here to stay, because this we know, there's no perspective that anytime soon Germany will restart again buying cheap Russian gas as it has done for the last couple of years, which kept the German machine running. My next question to you is, I read a couple of days ago about a new study that was published by Friedrich Ebert Foundation, and it said that 1 in 12 people in Germany shares a right-wing extremist worldview. And far-right views have significantly increased in the past 2 years and has exceeded 8%. So with all these problems, the economy, inflation, why do you think Germans are finding comfort in the far right? First of all, the people in Germany are not happy, and the people in Germany are not optimistic. And to give you another number of another research which was published a couple of days ago in the Politbarometer of the second German television, to also name the source for our listeners, 60% believe that economically Germany is on the downturn, which is not positive at all for the government, because people tend to judge the government's performance by how it works out economically. This is nothing specifically German. Also, and interestingly enough, 55%, so a little less than 60, are not happy with the government. And if you look at the opinion polls for the political parties, you will see that the government parties, and I mentioned a while ago that there is a party coalition. There are 3 political parties which form the government. It's the Social Democrat Party, SPD of Olaf Scholz, it's the Green Party, and it's the Liberal FDP Party. And all these parties in the opinion polls are losing votes. And the only party basically which is gaining, which is growing, and this is a source of a lot of unease and very, very intensive soul searching in Germany. And I can emphasize this. There's a permanent debate going on about the reasons for this, is the growth of the right-wing Alternative for Germany. And this party is particularly influential in the eastern part of Germany. Germany was reunited, as we all know, 1990. And one could assume that after 30 years, 33 years now, the division has been overcome, and economically and maybe infrastructure-wise it has, but in the minds of the people it has not. And we see in the opinion polls that the AfD, the party of the Alternative for Germany, which is a right-wing party, and Eastern Germany, parts of it are really Nazist. There the party is the first party. And again, why is this so important? This is, of course, very embarrassing, if you may, for Germany internationally. It's very uneasy for democratic people in Germany. But in the next year, there will be local elections in 3 very important Eastern German states. If it would be today, the AfD would actually be the biggest party. And in all these 3 states I'm mentioning where elections will be held, the AfD, this is Thuringia, this is Saxonia, this is Brandenburg. In all these states, AfD at this stage has more than 30%. And the SPD, which is the party, of course, of the Social Democrats, which is governing now in Berlin, in some of these states will fall under 10%. What we're seeing is a political earthquake. And unfortunately, the prophecy of this earthquake is not another democratic party, but is a right-wing party, which many believe to be anti-democratic and not based on the constitution.
That is not something not unique that is happening in Germany. We see it also in France. We see it also in Italy. And I want to ask you, do you think that the democratic institutions in Germany are strong enough to manage an earthquake like that if Alternative für Deutschland gets so many votes? Because we saw that in France, democracy won. We don't know what will happen, of course, in the next presidential elections. We saw that also in the United States. Do you think that Germany is strong enough?
First of all, while it is legitimate to compare Germany with France and Italy, from a German perspective, we would have to insist that right-wing politics and fascism has a totally different quality in Germany than it has in the other countries, because there's the strong sense of guilt also, if you want, in the majority of the Germans' mind that the German right wing caused disaster for Europe and is responsible for the worst crimes committed in humanity. And for Germans, the sense of never again is much more developed and is much more an issue in German politics than might be in other countries. So I would not like comparing this, although sociological, it has to be compared. So there is a speciality if we have these parties rising in Germany. Now, the big question and the big point, and here I want to make a point, is that this does not mean that 30% of the people who are now supporting the AfD are fascists. This does not mean that Germany is turning back to Hitler and the NSDAP. No, this would be a very, very wrong interpretation of the things. The analysis is that the political parties, the democratic political parties, simply have to grow up to the challenges and to seriously address the issues which the people are worried about. This is the economy on the one side. That's one thing. People are being left behind economically, socially, and people are frustrated about this. Another issue is, and this is something we have to talk about if we talk about the rise of right-wing parties in Europe, it's the migration issue. Germany has reached a point regarding the migration issue and the influx of foreign refugees and migrants, which also already slowly on the left wing is said that it is coming too far, that the country cannot actually cope with the influx anymore. And just, I think, one day ago, the Green Party, which is really not suspicious of being anti-migrant, and the federal president, Mr. Steinmeier, he actually said that Germany has reached a point where a breaking point, And here I must remind us of the year 2016, and the Greeks will very well remember the influx coming from Turkey over the Aegean and the Balkan, where hundreds of thousands of migrants, mainly from Syria, entered Europe and then settled in Germany. This was seen by many in Germany as, and it was effectively, a loss of control of politics over these streams of people. And it was actually the beginning of the end of the reign of Angela Merkel, because then started the big opposition and then started basically the growth of the right wing. And so some sort of compromise, some sort of solution to this has to be found. And the political parties are working on this. And this is a major challenge. And it's not only a challenge for Germany, but it's for Europe in general.
Ronald, I've heard you talk in interviews, and I've read also your many articles, even before the earthquake in Turkey, talking about the subtle German diplomacy regarding Greek-Turkish relations. So I want to ask you, what do we see now? We saw Greek Prime Minister Mitsotakis and the Turkish President Erdogan meeting in New York. We see that things are getting better between Greece and Turkey. Do you believe that Berlin played a role in fixing the relations between the two countries?
Actually, this is one of, I would say, my specialities, and I'm doing research on this for some while now. And I very, very carefully also investigated the issue, had many interviews also in Berlin with the foreign ministry. I spoke to diplomats in Athens and Ankara. It is a little known issue, but because we are known and accustomed to the United States of America playing the central role if it comes to mediating, if you may, or reducing tension in the Eastern Mediterranean, certainly in the Aegean. And I'm well aware of the history of Greek-Turkish relations, which go back to the 70s of last century, where indeed the United States were playing the critical role. But my thesis, and I have a lot of evidence for this, is that with the United States of America slowly dissociating itself from Europe and having a new focus in the Pacific and in the Eastern Asian theater, if you may, with China being the main preoccupation, there are indication and more indications that Washington is letting the Europeans know that, listen, these are European problems, and we would prefer you people to solve these, at least if we look at the technical diplomatic dimension of this. Not the major security level, but the diplomatic political dimension of this. And it is in this context that Berlin has taken up, if you weigh in a labor sharing agreement with the United States, the role of making sure that things don't lose control in the Eastern Mediterranean and between Greece and Turkey. And we saw this for the first time very, very impressively in summer of 2020, when in the Eastern Mediterranean, the navies of Greece and Turkey were very close to a military confrontation. And it was then not the United States president, but it was Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, who intervened, and due to her very close relations with President Erdogan, actually managed to diffuse the tension. And closer to where we are now, in December of last year, you will remember that tensions were running high between Athens and Ankara. It was the time when Erdogan was preparing for his elections, and there was not a day without provocations coming from Ankara, violation of Greek airspace in the Aegean, and very, very hostile rhetoric coming from Mr. Erdogan. And this was a situation where, again, the German diplomats, for the first time in months, managed to bring together in Brussels senior Greek and Turkish diplomats, and made them agree that it's time now to bury the hatchet and start talking. And this was a German diplomatic initiative. And then, if you look at it historically now, came the horrible earthquakes, and then the earthquake diplomacy of Nikos Dendias, the Greek then foreign minister, which then gave the whole process a new push. And if you look very carefully at, and I'm following this very carefully indeed, at the statements coming from the Berlin government, they are giving a lot of applause to what Erdogan and Mitsotakis are doing now. They're giving public support to this, much more than other European leaders. And if I speak to German diplomats off the record, they're very, very clear in stating that indeed they are following this. Of course, not to the extent that they were pushing them, no, and not to the extent that they're prescribing solutions. This is a sovereign right of the Greek government and the Turkish government. But if you speak to German diplomats, they're supporting the process. They are in favor of a mediation. They would be happy if this is brought to the International Court of Justice. And they tell you then behind closed doors that should this process lose steam, they will again give it some push, and they will make sure that Greeks and Turks remain in the dialogue mode. And I think this is an important contribution. In both countries, this is not talked about a lot. Greeks, for very good reasons, do not like foreigners mingling in their national affairs. They are allergic to this. And for this reason, you will find very little on record about this. But it's happening politically. And as a political scientist and an analyst, I think it's worthwhile looking into it and publishing what comes out.
Ronald, thank you very much for this discussion. You helped us get the big picture and another perspective about what is happening in Germany regarding also what is happening inside Germany, but also about their foreign policy regarding Greece and Turkey, which, as you very well know, it's an ongoing struggle for both countries for many years now. Thank you so much, Ronald.
Thank you, and all the best, and continue the good work at the ELIAMEP podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ronald. This was another ELIAMEP podcast with Odin Linardatou. Recording, editing, and sound editing by Petros Karpathiou. Follow us on the ELIAMEP channels on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and elsewhere.